galaxy. You are holy, and I say holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, and I say holy. Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of heaven and earth. Early in the morning, I will celebrate the light. And when I stumble in the darkness, I will call your name by night. God of wonders beyond our galaxy, you are holy, and I sing holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, and I sing holy. Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of heaven and earth.
Our world is in the midst of a storm. You know, you kind of get the feeling that if you could see our world from outer space, you would see it with watery eyes and a runny nose and a face mask around it. In just a few short months, it seems our world has been turned upside down. Numbers keep coming in about illnesses in every country. Numbers keep going down as the stock market reels from devastating losses. And numbers keep rising as more and more people are confirmed to have the illness. Not only has our world in general been tossed into a storm, your own personal world has as well. You hear the constant blaring of the up-to-the-minute news reports, and you see the aisles and aisles of empty shelves, and you hear the policy changes coming down from Washington, from our state, from our city, and you're not sure what will happen tomorrow. Friends, it's in times like these, times when you're struggling to keep it all together, times when you're trying to put your best foot forward, times when you're fighting to keep your little boat afloat. It's in times like these that you're likely to cry out, "Where are you, God? Aren't you interested in what's happening? Don't you care?" Listen, friends, you wouldn't be the first one to ask that question. When we go to the Bible and we go to Mark chapter 4 and we look at verses 35 through 41, we find this interesting story. It says, "On the same day when evening had come, he said to them," talking about Jesus, he said to them, "Let us cross over to the other side." Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat onto the boat so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no hope and no faith?" And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, "Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Jesus had had a busy day. All day he had been teaching the people, and he had been healing the sick that were among them. Now it was late in the afternoon, and people were still coming to him. Needless to say, Jesus was weary, he was tired, and he was hungry. Now listen, right here there's an important point that needs to be made. I want you to understand that Jesus understands what you're going through. You see, Jesus has been through everything you have been through, are going through, will ever go through, and even some stuff that you and I will never be asked to endure. That's why in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15 it says, "For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin." You see, Jesus understands. He got tired, he got weary, he got hungry, he was betrayed, he was lied to. He felt the pain of others, and listen, he feels your pain as well. There's nothing that you are feeling that Jesus hasn't felt. And that's why he understands you, and he understands what you're going through. And because Jesus understands, Hebrews chapter 4 verse 16 tells us, "Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." Because Jesus understands, we can approach him with the assurance that he will hear us and he will help us. Jesus was tired, he was weary, and he needed rest. So he tells his disciples, "Let's cross over to the other side." Now it says that when they left the multitude, then they all got into a little boat. But then Scripture says that a storm came up. Matthew, in Matthew chapter 8, verse 24, calls it a great tempest. In the Greek, a megaseismos, which literally means a great earthquake. Like any other sea, the Sea of Galilee can be calm, can be tranquil, and a joy to be on. But this was a great storm. This wasn't some small thunderstorm. Archibald Robertson, in Word Pictures of the New Testament, says these windstorms rushed from Mount Hermon down through the Jordan Gorge into the Sea of Galilee and shook it like a tempest, shook it like an earthquake. When that windstorm came upon the lake, those experienced fishermen began the fight of their lives. Now, they had been in many storms before, but not one like this one. They fought and they struggled to keep that little boat afloat. The wind kept pounding and the waves kept getting higher and higher. That little boat began rolling from side to side and it began to fill with water. The disciples tried as hard as they could to bail out the water, but it got to be too much for them. And as they felt the power of the wind and saw the height of the waves, and as they saw their little boat filling up with water, they lost all hope. They were sure that there was no way out. They were sure things were only going to get worse. They were sure they were all going to die. You see, they were so focused on the storm, trying to solve it all by themselves, so focused on the situation at hand, that they forgot that Jesus was in the boat with them. Now listen, here's another very important point that I don't want you to miss. When your world has been turned upside down, when it seems that all hope is lost, when the storms of uncertainty seem to be getting bigger and bigger, don't focus on the storm. Focus on Jesus, because He's closer to you than you could ever imagine. The disciples were all into saving themselves. They completely forgot about Jesus, thinking that all was lost. Seeing only the storm in their life, they forgot who it was that told them to cross the sea. Full of doubt and full of fear, and not able to see Jesus because of the dark night, they even questioned that maybe He had abandoned them. They realized that Jesus was their only hope, and they knew what He had done in the past for them, but now with all their focus on the storm, they had forgotten all about that. The wind was howling, the waves were pounding, their boat was sinking. Not much longer, and all would be lost. Listen, we can't blame these poor disciples, because you and I do the same thing. Our world can be calm and tranquil at times, We can be enjoying the peacefulness of life. Yet, as we have learned, without a notice, our world can turn into a great storm and our life can be turned upside down. When all that happens, many times we get so focused on the storm, on how to get rid of it, that we forget that Jesus is by our side to give us assurance and help. How many people are glued to the TV trying to get all the information they can on what's happening? How many are figuring out how to get more of this or more of that, not thinking about anyone else or anything, but how to save themselves? And it seems like the darkness is closing in that we begin also to doubt that maybe Jesus isn't listening to us. Maybe He's not even there. We might even be tempted to think that He has abandoned us. Maybe in the darkness of uncertainty, we just can't see that Jesus is there. And we cry out, "Where are you, God?" Remember, when your world has been turned upside down, when it seems like all hope is lost, when the storms of uncertainty seem to be looming bigger and bigger, don't focus on the storm. Focus on Jesus, because He's closer than you think. Suddenly, lightning flashes in the darkness, and the disciples see Jesus asleep on the boat. And Mark chapter 4, verse 38 says that they woke Him up and they said, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Now listen, basically what they were saying is, how can you sleep at a time like this? Don't you care that we're going to die? Basically they were saying is, how dare you sleep, God? How dare you sleep when I'm struggling with all these uncertainties? How dare you sleep when I'm having these anxiety attacks? How dare you sleep when I'm fighting the fear of losing my job or the fear of having lost my job? How dare you sleep when I'm battling to keep my family safe? How dare you sleep when I've lost a loved one? How dare you sleep when the illnesses just seem to be mounting up and up? God, how dare you sleep when the world doesn't know what to do? How dare you sleep when I don't know what to do? In the book Desire of Ages, page 334, we're told that the disciples wondered how Jesus could rest so peacefully while they were in danger of battling with death. You and I have wondered the very same thing. And yet in Mark chapter 4, verse 39, it says, "Then He, Jesus, arose, and He rebuked the wind, and He said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm." Don't miss this. Look at this. Picture this. Jesus stands up in that little boat, and He looks the scene over before Him. The wind is howling, the waves are pounding, the little boat is filling, and the disciples are trembling. And He raises His hand, Jesus raises His hand calmly, peacefully, without any anxiety, and He says to the wind and to the sea, "Peace, be still." And immediately the wind stops, the clouds leave, the stars shine forth, and the sea becomes calm and serene. Listen, my friend, trust Jesus, because He can do the very same thing in your life. The news is howling the bad news of the illness. The people are pounding the stores for the merchandise. Your little boat feels like it's rolling from side to side, and you may feel terrified about the uncertainty about this whole situation. But if you stop and think, Jesus has helped you through uncertainties in your life in the past. Listen to Him as He says to the uncertainties you're struggling with in your heart, "Peace, be still," and feel the wave of assurance that only Jesus can give. Now, how is it? Why could Jesus sleep through the storm? Because nothing listen, nothing takes Jesus by surprise. Friends, He saw this pandemic long before it appeared. And He knows way ahead of time what He's going to do. And as He looks out over the scene, He hears your cry howling, and He sees your heart pounding. He sees the anxiety on your face, and so He raises His hand over you, and He says, "Peace, be still." You see, Jesus has already made a way for you where there seems to be no way. And it's up to you and it's up to me to trust Jesus in the midst of the storm. Trust that Jesus is in control of your life and He knows what He's doing. When we come down to verse 40 of Mark chapter 4, Jesus looks at His disciples and He asks them, "Why are you fearful?" Interestingly enough, Jesus not only rebuked the wind and the waves, but He also rebuked His disciples. Archibald Robertson tells us, they, the disciples, had the Lord of the wind and the waves with them in the boat. He was still master, even if asleep in the storm. Friends, the bottom line is this: Jesus is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, regardless of what happens to my life. And as Lord of all and as the King of all, Jesus can still provide for you and for your family, for me and for my family. Listen, I've proved it in my life. Before I became a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, the church, the denomination I belonged to, when they would pick up an offering, they'd bring a little basket by, and whatever I had in my pocket, that's what I would give them. You know, sometimes it was 50 cents, sometimes it was a quarter. When I became a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and I found out what the Bible teaches about tithing, 10%. Can you imagine how that affected my life? I thought, wow, I used to give, on a good day I'd give $1. But now it was 10%. But I believed it because it was in God's Word. It's written right there. So what I would do is I would get my paycheck and I would put God's 10% aside, first of all, and then of course an offering. But then I would start to figure out the car, the house, all the rent and all the other bills. Now listen, this happened to me twice. I'll never forget this. It was just as I was beginning my walk with Christ. I remember I got my paycheck. I put the tithe aside, put the offering aside, put the rent, put the car payment, put all these all these bills, and I came up short. There was no money for groceries. And the cupboards were bare. We had 4 little children and they ate quite a bit. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Now the enemy, he's always there by your side, and the enemy was there and he said, hey, there's the tithe money, use that. And I'd say, no, I can't. No, that belongs to God. And he would say, yeah, I know that. He said, but just borrow it. You can pay it back as interest. I'd say, no, that belongs to God. And God said that He would take care of us. So what we did, we'd go to church on Sabbath. We took God's tithe. We did not tell a soul that our cupboards were bare, completely bare. We wouldn't tell anyone that. Cheerfully turned over what is God's. And listen to me, this happened not once, but twice. When we got home that Sabbath, when we got home from church, on our porch were boxes full of food, enough to last for that week. I know where that food came from. I know that God will take care of you because He took care of me. I saw it. It happened. Listen, this world is in the midst of a storm. Your world is in the midst of a storm, and you may not know what to do. You may be fighting to keep your little boat afloat, but things don't seem to be getting any better. Maybe waves of fear, of anxiety, of uncertainty are filling your little boat until all hope seems lost. You may be tempted to think that God has abandoned you. But remember, Jesus is still in control, my friend. God is still sitting on the throne. Take everything. Take everything, your uncertainty, your fears, your anxieties, your doubts. Take everything to Jesus and let Him calm the storms in your heart. He understands what you're going through, and He's willing to help. And when your world has turned upside down, when it seems like all hope is lost, when the storms of uncertainty seem to be looming greater and greater, don't focus on the storm. Focus on Jesus. He's closer to you than you could ever imagine at this moment. Listen, if Jesus can stop the wind and the waves of a mighty storm, He can stop the winds of doubt and the waves of uncertainty in your heart. Peace, be still, is what God is telling you at this very moment.
I felt the need that I needed to go to Brazil during the 2014 World Cup. We were told not to go into favelas at all. We ended up taking the risk of going into one at night the very first time, which was it's a bad idea. As pimps, traffickers, prostitutes, people that you would consider had absolutely no hope. But we would get there, and we talked to them, and all of a sudden we realized God was already working in their lives. And I just wanted to do something. After I do a presentation or something, so what do I do? How do I intervene in human trafficking? What is the first step? And they look at me a little odd when I basically respond with, well, pray. Jesus is the intercessor, and that's what makes us safe. It's what makes us safe from the devil's accusations and attacks, and it's also what makes us children in the sight of God. I'm a steward because my Father is the giver.